So whatever the scenario is, if it's financial, medical, age of the mother, whatever,
It's always relevant.
just trot out the toddler.
Right.
And it really helps to clarify the issue.
Yes.
Because now it's an innocent victim,
And it's human.
it's human,
It's alive.
and the only difference between that toddler and the same toddler a few months ago is size,
Time,
level of development,
growth.
yeah, environment, dependency, and that continues.
Yeah.
Well, hello and welcome back to this week's episode of About Abortion. I'm joined once again by Dave Payne. Dave, thanks so much for coming back.
Thank you for having me.
It's great that you came back.
I want to come back.
How did you find the first couple of sessions?
Yeah, fine to do. Interesting to look back at. And I'm very keen to do more and to be here as much as I can.
Good. And have you had any sort of feedback? Anyone watched the videos? You know how they got on with them?
Yeah, my dad said he watched it. He said it was a bit long.
Yeah.
But he liked it. I watched it with my wife, and it was very interesting. She said it changed a lot of things in her mind changed when she watched it, and she wanted to share it. Actually, she wanted to be able to, which was quite a big thing for her. She went to quite a prestigious all-girls grammar school, and she did very well. So she was very much amongst female elites. So it's almost certain that people there would have probably had abortions and do like further careers, and
Right.
so for her to share it is a very but that was her immediate reaction is it shareable, or she wanted more people to see it and more.
Brilliant. Fantastic.
Yeah.
Well,
Definitely picked up on some things that I could improve on as well.
we're all learning.
Yeah,
we're all learning.
absolutely.
That's why we're here.
Not familiar with seeing a video of myself, so
No, it was great. We'll do a little recap of that in a couple of moments for those who didn't catch it. But for those who aren't aware, maybe didn't see Dave a few episodes ago, we're doing a little series on really how to talk about abortion. How do we have those conversations? And so we've had episodes 1 and 2 looking really at the mind, getting our mind and our thinking straight. We looked at the heart, getting our sort of attitudes, the way we're seeing this issue, and the people we're speaking to, getting that straight. And today we're moving on really to the mouth, as it were, so our speaking. Mouth's good for pizza as well, though, aren't they?
absolutely. And garlic bread
And garlic bread,
chicken nuggets.
chicken nuggets. What's the worst thing you've ever had on a pizza?
Good question. Probably pineapple.
I was going to say the same.
Yeah, just doesn't belong there.
A brother in the Lord confessed to me the other day he liked pineapple on pizza, and I
Felt discord.
it could be a primary issue. I don't know.
Yeah,
could be. We could be looking at discipline there. But no, we're full of pizza and we're ready to go. So let's just do a little recap of episode 1. Let's see if any of this has stayed. So
Oh, crumbs.
so you did say when you're watching it with your wife that something that stuck was actually just how simple the issue is. What were you talking about there?
Just the fact. Yeah, so it is just so remarkably simple when you take everything back and just look at the issue for what it truly is. The fact is just killing a defenseless human that hasn't done anything, let alone anything wrong consciously, and you're just killing it. There's no, that's it.
Yeah.
It's just,
Yeah.
it's so simple, but it also is so complex, and there's so many other things. Right, like you're going to give me a lesson how to talk about it. I can talk about most things, but it's very difficult to talk about this, and I value your lesson.
I think it's emotionally, it can be very complicated. So emotionally complex, but that doesn't mean it's morally complex.
No.
And I think that's where people get confused. They think because it's a difficult issue emotionally, they think, it must be a grey issue.
Right.
Morally, but actually, we'll come back to this at the very end, but I'll mention it now. It's as simple as this. If the unborn aren't human, no justification for abortion is necessary.
Yes. But then it gets complex because people will deny that, and I don't really know how to reason with someone.
Yeah.
So I was working with a chap, and I'm going to call him Joe Blogs. This is a real conversation I had a couple of days ago, and he's a clever guy. He's a really good guy. He's a great carpenter. He's fantastic at his job. He's clever. He can run a whole project, but he blatantly and openly denied that it's even alive. And he sort of said, "Nah, don't believe you there. Don't." He accused me of being controversial for the sake of being controversial, and that I just wanted to do it because it's not a secular thought way to view this issue. And then he just blatantly said it's not even a living thing, and walked away. And I was just totally baffled, honestly baffled. I watched him leave, and I was like, "What could I have said further?"
Right.
At that point.
Right. Yeah.
Because I said, my analogy before that was, you can like pop a maggot in the inside of a bin. That's fine. I think that's if you wanted to do that, or swat a fly. Well, how is this different? Hoping that he would say that because this is a human, it should be set apart from those other things. But he just then denied. He said the maggot was a living thing, so it would be like worse to do that.
Wow.
And I was like, well, hang on a minute. But yeah, and he walked away, and I couldn't argue that further. But I don't know how to argue that at that point. It's so
and that's what we're here for today. Because it's one thing to know the case for life, and we did that in session 1. We looked at our sort of syllogism.
Yes,
it's wrong to intentionally kill an innocent human being.
Yeah,
and abortion intentionally kills an innocent human being. Therefore, abortion is wrong, and it is that simple. And yet, the conversations don't always feel simple.
No.
All sorts of
tangents,
and
red herrings,
and then they may even just storm off, as you say. Yeah. They're out of the room before you can even sort of muster a reply. So today we're going to look at the conversation. Okay,
good.
The conversation and how we can really open up, so initiate, and then direct a fruitful conversation about abortion.
Okay, that sounds good.
Okay, so that's what we're doing today. And actually your little anecdote with your friend is a helpful starter, because I was going to ask you sort of how you found it on the streets, but conversations about abortion. But I think what you cited there was a really good example that we'll actually come back to, because I think it serves as a helpful kind of case study in a conversation. But first of all, let's just get a few things in place as to the kinds of ways in which we want to direct these conversations. And I want to say that first of all, we want to focus much more on the questions we're asking than on the answers we're giving.
Right. Okay.
And the reason for that, well, actually, let me ask you, why do you think that might be fruitful, to focus on the questions we're asking?
You have more control over it for a start.
Yeah. The one asking the questions directs the conversation. Yeah. And
you could, if you received a reply that didn't make sense, were you to engage with that reply and think about that, you could then be drawn off your original tack.
I think staying on track is one of the most important things in a conversation about abortion. It's so easy to get blown off course. And
you lose, that's the simplicity of the issue.
And you end up talking about
something else,
climate change.
Or the ethics of rapists.
I mean,
not that those issues aren't something in and of themselves, but you weren't talking about that originally.
That's right. They might be valid issues, but there's a tendency in these conversations to draw away from the main thing and talk about other things. So our job is to keep the main thing the main thing. We'll come on to that in a minute. And questions are one of our sharpest tools for the job. Now, in terms of the kinds of questions we want to ask open questions as opposed to closed. Is that a term you're familiar with? Open questions. So open questions really are questions that don't have just a yes or no answer.
Right.
So instead of, are you pro-life, you would ask, what do you think about abortion? Okay. Or instead of saying, is that a good thing? You can say, have you considered what that could lead to? Or what sorts of things could that lead to? If we accept this, what does it mean for, e.g., people with Alzheimer's or the disabled or the elderly? Have you, what could it mean for the way we value them? So open questions, get people thinking, and we want them to question their own thinking. So we've got to get them thinking, and it helps us to see their thinking. I see it as very much a diagnostic. It's like they're in the doctors, and I'm trying to figure out what's wrong with their thinking. I can only do that if I can see their thinking.
Okay, yeah, that
so
makes
asking
sense.
the right questions exposes
their thought process.
Yeah, it's like it opens up a window for me to look at. There's no point me barking up the wrong tree. If they already agree life begins with fertilization, I don't want to spend half an hour lecturing them on how life begins with fertilization.
Right.
Because their issue might be somewhere else. So I think 90% of the conversation is trying to find out what actually is their problem. What is the issue? What's their hold up?
How do you identify the issue?
Right. Well, yeah. We'll look at some questions to help us to do.
Okay.
That. Okay. So just a couple of questions, and feel free to note these down if it's helpful. And likewise, those listening in. So the idea of these sessions is a kind of interactive tutorial. You're listening as you're doing the washing up, driving, whatever. Feel free just to note these things down and practice them with a friend. It'd be really good actually to sit down with a friend and listen to these and practice together. So a couple of key questions, great to have up your sleeve. Simple questions. What do you mean by that? Okay, it's a simple question, but it's one you want to have up your sleeve. What do you mean by that? So I'll give you an example. Often on the streets, you'll ask someone, maybe, what do you think about abortion? And they'll say something, often they'll just kind of say a kind of slogan like, well, it's up to her.
Her body, her choice.
Her body, her choice.
Right.
I think it's her right to choose. By asking, what do you mean by that? You're going to get a lot more from them.
Yes, they have to expound.
That's right.
On that point.
Exactly. So it's a simple question, but it's so helpful for getting the conversation going. Because someone's like, oh, it's her right. Often,
it could have been an off-the-cuff mark that they've never even thought about at all.
Exactly. Almost certainly it is. And from that remark, you can't tell if they're seriously like pro-abortion up till birth for any reason, or actually, more often the case, if you say, what do you mean by that? They say, well, I don't think people should do it lightly. And you find out actually they're only really in favour in quite extreme circumstances.
And they weren't aware of quite the extent of how much is going on in a more casual sense.
Exactly. So what do you mean by that? Simple question, but a helpful one. And then another is, how did you come to that conclusion? Okay,
I can see these are good questions. Yeah, I can see that.
Because often it's just they're repeating what they've heard elsewhere.
And you're asking for the thought process.
That's right.
How did you come to that conclusion?
And that's making them reconsider already. Okay, yeah, why do I think that? Have I ever actually thought it through?
Yeah.
Okay, so just a couple of questions. Okay, so we're going to look next episode at some of your conversations on the street.
Crumbs.
Got your body camera data, which is great. Looking forward to that. So we'll come on to that next session. But just briefly, how have you found the moment of sort of initiating a conversation on the street?
Super awkward.
Yeah.
Not something I naturally want to do. I probably blundered into it a bit. I probably just went for it and just did something. I think I copied you. I noticed you saying, "What do you think about abortion?" As a way. I thought it was kind of.
Yeah.
It did impress me as a way to. It's like an inoffensive way to ask a really offensive question.
Yeah. I think that's the best question to begin with. Yeah, I think it's an open question.
Yeah.
And what I found, I don't know what you found, but I think almost everyone has an opinion about abortion. Very rarely do you get someone saying, I have no opinion. Everyone's got an opinion, but not many people have much knowledge.
Yes.
Yeah, and they haven't thought it through. So it gets them talking. So I recommend to people listening in, just start with a simple open question. What do you think about abortion? Okay. Now, this gets the ball rolling, and pretty quickly you get some responses back. Okay. If you get a bit of a short reply, helpful to say, what do you mean by that? But then what have you found already, Dave, on the streets or in other contexts? What sort of things come back before too long? When you ask people, what do you think about abortion?
They'll present some reasons why it's acceptable. Right,
exactly. So reasons or certain situations, circumstances. So I find if you dig a little, do a bit of a diagnostic, most people will say, I think abortion is okay if, there's a certain set of circumstances.
Yeah.
So they think it's justified if, in certain situations, And again, that's where my other question comes in, or in fact the same one again. What do you mean by that? What circumstances? Okay. So what are the sorts of situations that you've heard people use as well? It's reasonable. It's the right thing to do in this situation.
If the girl's been raped.
Yeah, that's probably the top one we hear.
Yeah.
Do you want to maybe actually note them down in one list just down the left? Because we're going to make another list on the right, and it's helpful.
Justifications for.
Yes, these are justifications, reasons people give. Okay, so rape. What other situations?
Medical, like if. Yeah, the baby could harm the mother or something.
Yeah.
Any medical reasons. Couldn't afford to keep the baby, so like poverty.
Yeah.
The dude threatened to leave.
Yes.
He said he would.
Yeah. Sort of relationship issues.
Yeah, relationship issue. Mine's going a bit blank.
I think sometimes they'll cite, if the mother's very young.
Yes, too young, immature.
Teenager, for example. I would say those are some of the most common ones.
Yeah, probably.
Most common. Sometimes they'll say, oh, well, if the baby's not even wanted,
yes,
going to have a rubbish life.
Yeah.
Now, a lot of those grouped together, just as a kind of point of information, rape, medical situations, life of the mother, that sort of thing, all grouped together, they form such a tiny minority of the abortion statistics.
Yes.
98% of abortions are performed on healthy mothers, healthy babies.
Just by choice.
It's choice. It's unwanted for one reason or another. So that's just as an aside, okay?
Right. But I was aware of that. Yeah.
Yeah, but these are the sorts of reasons we hear. Okay. Now, I think it's very easy to find that within just a few seconds in a conversation, something comes hurling at you. What about rape? Are you really going to say a woman who's been raped is going to be forced to have her baby? And you can feel a bit sort of cornered.
Yeah.
A bit stunned, and it's like someone's
a rabbit in the headlights.
That's right. It's like someone's just served 100 mile an hour ball to you, and what do you do? So I'm going to just introduce now a tool that I've found really helpful for actually meeting that.
Right, good.
And turning it around.
Good.
To help form a constructive conversation, about abortion. So before we get into this tool, greatest communicator of all time. Tell us about the greatest communicator of all time.
Jesus?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
How did he do it? What was his communication style, would you say? Do you notice anything about the way he spoke with people? What did he use?
Stories and parables.
Stories and parables, yeah.
It's quite simple to understand, even though he spoke with authority. Not really sure. I'm missing something really obvious.
No, you got it, exactly. It's telling stories.
He's gentle and loving.
Yeah, certainly. And the other thing I have in mind is he asked questions.
Okay,
he asked a lot of questions.
Did he really? I hadn't noticed
I forget the exact figure, but I saw it recently. He asked a lot of questions.
Really? That's interesting.
Lots and lots of questions. He often starts, what do you think? And then he tells a story. And then, which of these three was a neighbour to,
Yeah.
He's always asking questions, putting it back to his listeners, okay? So there's a tool that we've kind of, it's very much inspired. By the way, Jesus spoke common ground analogy question, okay? CAQ, common ground analogy question. It's worth noting that down, people listening in. Common ground analogy question. So common ground, and I think this is the one that's perhaps for some of us quite easy to forget, is we need to find the common ground with the person we're speaking with, and that helps to kind of cool the conversation down a bit. They understand that we're
on the same side.
Yeah,
we don't want to. We don't want a conflict. We don't want any.
Right. Yeah.
Ideally, we want no disagreement whatsoever.
Yeah. We're trying to walk alongside them.
Yeah.
We're not against them, and it's important that we show that we understand the situations they're talking about. Often those are real situations. So common ground. Then analogy, so a parable, a story.
Right.
It could be a real story. It could be something that's happened in your own life. It could be a kind of made-up story like a parable. And then always finish with a question to keep them talking and to keep directing the conversation. Okay, so perhaps should we do a couple of examples?
Yeah,
okay,
absolutely.
I'll show you kind of what I mean, and then you can have a go. So let's take one of those situations. Let's take, for example, the financial one.
Right.
Okay, so the objection comes in, a mother's already got 3 kids, there's no money, she's pregnant again. Are you really saying she should be forced to have this 4th child? She can't even afford to feed the 3 she's already got. Okay. It's easy to jump straight into trying to argue back, so it's important to take time to find the common ground. Okay, so just acknowledge it. So common ground. Yeah, I acknowledge that would be a really difficult situation to be in. I can think of nothing more painful than actually not being able to feed your own children, not being able to afford that. Heartbreaking situation, and certainly, it's important.
Empathizing with the mother, and that's the common ground there, to see the hardship in the situation. Right, I'm with you.
And we always need to bear in mind, it could be a real situation of the person we're speaking to. That happens often.
Yeah, quite.
On the streets, you just don't know.
So to immediately counter that, or belittles it in some way.
Exactly.
It's not giving enough recognition.
Exactly.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And that's, one of the accusations, and it's not a particularly valid one, but sometimes the accusation against pro-lifers is, they don't care about anything apart. All they care about is pro-birth. They're not pro.
Yeah, I would be guilty of doing that. Definitely, I'd start telling them all the ways they could provide for that child. You can just, get a better job. Or there's definitely welfare for that. Like no children starves in this.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm guilty of that for 100%.
And it's easily done, and I think there are at least two issues with it. One is, they might feel that you're being more combative than is necessary.
What's
combative? Fighting.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
But the other thing is, you end up then talking about the wrong thing.
You've gone off.
You're then debating about the social system.
Social structure. Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So best to just acknowledge it and just let it be. So totally understand that situation. But just imagine with me a situation, and here's where you're going into telling the story, okay? A parable, right? So, but imagine with me a situation where there is a mother in that situation. She's got 3 children, another one on the way, and she chooses to carry on with that pregnancy, and she has that baby, and now the baby's 1 year old or coming up for 2, toddler, and she's still really struggling financially. Would it be okay to take a knife and kill that toddler because she can't afford to feed it? Now, most people are going to say,
obviously not.
Obviously not. And then we say, unless they already make the connection as to where we're going, what then is the difference? Why is it not okay to kill a toddler because of financial hardship, but it is okay to kill the same child when she's just a bit younger and in the womb? And what we've done there, and that's just through simple common ground analogy question, in quite a sort of non-confrontational way, is we've redirected the conversation from a kind of what they may see as a sort of trump card of an awful situation, and how dare you suggest, you've actually carried them around to now we're talking about what we want to talk about, which is the nature
killing
of
babies.
Exactly. What abortion actually is.
Killing small human,
It's a human
infant
being.
humans.
So we're refocusing the conversation on the unborn child. And we have to work hard to do that.
Yes.
Because everyone wants to talk about everything else.
Anything but.
Anything but.
Anything but.
That's right.
Yeah. Okay.
So this is all about keeping the main thing the main thing. Because abortion, the whole debate comes down quite simply to this. What is the unborn child? If the unborn aren't human, right? If abortion is just like having your appendix out,
or blowing your nose,
then who cares?
It literally doesn't matter.
We don't need to have a debate. There is no justification required. But if the unborn are human, no justification for abortion is possible.
It's possible, yeah. It's not even yeah. It's just crazy that people don't see that.
Yeah.
It's mad that we're having to fight this.
I know. It is crazy, isn't it, when you stop and think about how our society's got to that. And one of the reasons it's got to that is that there is layer upon layer of deception and distraction. And it's our job as voices for the voiceless to represent the unborn child and to bring them back into the picture and make sure that people don't keep ignoring them. Okay, so that's common ground analogy question. I'll give you another quick example. Okay, let's think about, let's say the baby has some kind of abnormality. Let's say Down syndrome or something, okay? Yeah. Okay, so there's a diagnosis in the womb, baby's got, say, Down syndrome or something more severe. Are you really saying the mother should be forced, okay, to carry this baby to term, even though they're going to have a limited, Okay, common ground.
You see how that's going to be so difficult.
Yeah.
It's not going to be a normal life. It's
Yeah.
going to be so impacting on the parents.
Yeah.
They're going to struggle to make friends. They could be bullied.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, exactly. Acknowledging all of that. And it may be even in some situations, you actually know someone who's been through some of these things.
Yeah.
So I've got a number of friends who've got kids with Down syndrome, and I can certainly say they love their children dearly and their children are a real source of joy. I can also say there are specific challenges that accompany that.
It's clearly trying on the parents.
Yeah.
There's stress and
Yeah.
there's heartache and worry. Yeah.
Absolutely. And in particular, what does the future hold? When they reach adulthood, what does that look like? Yeah, there are these questions.
Yeah.
So great stuff. So that's common ground. Analogy. How would you go with the analogy here?
I go the same as before and
Yep.
say like, okay, so if you were to go full term, have the mother were to give birth to the child, and they're to grow up when they're 5 years old and they're having a tantrum and I don't know, soiling themselves in the supermarket, could you just literally like throw them in the river or like just get rid of them?
Yeah.
With that?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then exactly, and that's the question. To which they might say, well, no, of course not, but that's different.
Ask why it's different.
Good.
Where is the difference?
Good. And then...
Do you just be quiet at that point? You should literally let them speak. You don't point out.
If they haven't, if they're not drying up, I mean, often people will see where you're going and they'll say, oh, no, that's different, And then I'll definitely say, oh, in what way? How is it different? What's the difference?
Yeah.
And then we'll move on to the next section, because then what happens is they are forced, if they want to defend abortion, they've just said you can't kill the toddler.
But you can kill.
You can kill the unborn child.
Yeah.
They then have to come up with, and this is often what's going on the spot, they're inventing some reason why the unborn child doesn't count in the way that the toddler does.
Right.
Okay, and that's where we get to another kind of list that I think it's worth making. So we've made a list of the circumstances that people often cite.
Yeah.
And now we have a list of certain characteristics of the unborn child that people will use to say that's why they don't matter as much.
Okay, right,
okay?
Yeah. Not less developed.
Exactly, yeah, let's list some. So
yeah.
So often they'll say, okay, but that's different. You say, why is it different? And they'll say, because the fetus, the unborn child, whatever, because they're not
fully developed.
Good. Conscious is another classic, yeah.
I can't write very fast. And I'm a terrible speller. Developed. Conscious.
Even just they're not out yet. I hear that a lot.
Not out.
They're not out.
Like out the womb.
Yeah, exactly. They're not.
So they're not independent.
Yeah, not independent, or they're not. They've got no
less function.
Yeah, less function. Yeah, they're all functions, really, aren't they? Some might say, but they're tiny. It's just like it's this size.
How can that be?
Well, this
you
is
can't
it.
go around killing like small people.
Yeah, I know. Yeah,
short people. That's not some.
Yeah.
No. There are just elements to this that are just totally insane.
Yeah.
When you, like, a vulnerable pregnant woman, like, you would give up your seat on public transport for her.
Yeah.
It's like chivalrous to take care of her, to want to protect that, to see it as such a special thing. I don't understand how the opposite way of thinking is possible.
Yeah.
I don't understand.
And of course there are layers to that, aren't there? There's spiritual blindness and so on. But I think the great privilege and opportunity we have is that we can actually shine the spotlight on that insanity and that inconsistency with this tool.
Yes.
And that helps people to see, oh goodness, yeah, when you say it like that, I'm literally saying that because someone is smaller...
that life is meaningless.
Right.
A life form is meaningless.
Right.
Which no one wants to believe.
Yeah.
No one wants to believe that their life is meaningless.
So this is where we need to take people. So they're going to come up with a load of reasons why the unborn don't matter so much. And here's where we need to understand their argument even better than they do. Okay? Because sometimes their language is a bit confused. They'll say, well, it's not a life yet. Okay?
Yeah.
Now that sounds like a scientific statement. They're not a life yet. So let's just make sure we know what they're trying to say. Are they really saying there isn't biological life? If they are, show them the facts. There's a heartbeat at 3 weeks. It's growing. It's moving. There's a fingerprint at 10. So let's make sure they understand that scientifically it's alive. If they acknowledge that, but they're still saying, yeah, but it's not really a life yet.
What's the difference? What does that mean?
What they really mean by that is there's some reason why it may be technically a living human being, but it doesn't have value in the way that you and I do. And that'll be because of some particular function, such as what we're listing here. Oh, because they're not conscious, or because they don't have memory.
What does define a life then? What does make it?
Right. And that's where we need to...
No. Yeah.
This is where we need to direct the conversation further, because they're going to want to say the unborn child don't count because of X, Y, Z. And we need to help them to follow through that line of thinking. Okay?
Yes.
So they might say, oh, it's tiny. Okay? Okay, have you considered, and this helpful question might be worth noting down, have you considered the consequences of what you're saying there? Okay? Or have you considered the ramifications of what you're saying there? So, are you saying that smaller people have less of a right to life than larger people? Or they might say, well, it's not conscious yet. Okay, have you considered the consequences of what you're saying there? If in old age you develop Alzheimer's or dementia,
do you lose value?
Are you no longer valuable? Or if you're in a
disposable.
coma, yeah,
dispensable.
Dispensable, yeah.
Can you just be done away with?
Yeah. If you're in a coma and you're not aware anymore, you're not conscious, is it okay to kill you?
Your exam results drop. You're suddenly not doing as well, not performing as well.
Yeah. Is it our intellectual capacity that gives us value?
Yeah.
Yeah. And even if you want to be a bit more provocative, is it right to discriminate against people of lower intelligence?
Yeah, that's something nobody wants to be accused of.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Is it right to discriminate against people because their bodily functions aren't as strong as someone else's?
Cool. Yeah.
Okay.
I'm writing that question.
Yeah, so we can make it uncomfortable for people to stand by this support for the killing of unborn children. Is that wise
to make people?
I think it is. It's a line. It's a thin line we need to.
You don't want to antagonise.
We don't want to antagonise them, but we do want to challenge their thinking
and show a horrible thing for being a horrible thing.
That's right.
To reveal
and we're giving them an opportunity to change sides here.
To have a reform.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we do need to be. And it's a difficult line to, but we do need to stigmatise the act of killing an unborn child and support for that act. We're not looking to stigmatise people who've been involved.
Yes.
And that's a difficult line to walk.
Yeah, absolutely.
But it's what we've got to walk.
You have to walk it to have a safe society.
This is it.
Yeah.
So, and the language is so important in that. So, you can do it in a winsome way. Is it okay to discriminate against people because of their intellectual abilities? And you're not putting words in them. You're allowing them to speak for themselves.
That's an open question.
It's an open question.
Well, that isn't there. It's a yes no.
Well, that particular one is
but it's thought provoking. It helps
you're giving them an opportunity to say, well, no, of course not. And this is also where the analogy is helpful, because instead of it being me versus you, together we're looking at
There's like a.
And I think that's maybe why Jesus, one of the reasons he told these stories, because it helped people to see themselves from the outside in a fresh way.
Interesting.
So we got these functions, okay, because they're not out yet, because they're not fully developed, whatever. And there are ways we can expose the insanity of that, okay? So for all of these things, pretty much, they're not things that just happen overnight. They develop very slowly, over weeks, months, even years. Okay, so if you're going to say, because they're not fully developed, okay, is a toddler fully developed?
Yeah, a prepubescent is.
Right. In fact, we keep developing until about the age of 25, one way or another.
Yeah.
So
and then you're deteriorating. So you drop off. So
That's
what's
right.
when do you cross the point of being? Okay. Do you drop out? That's very dangerous.
Yeah. And you can ask questions like, is that the kind of society you want to live in?
Yeah. Would you be happy with that?
Right.
Like, you get to 50 and start worrying.
That's right. Once you're over the hill, past the peak. The thing is, it really is this simple. Either every human being matters. Or no human being matters. Because if our value is dependent on our functions, okay, on what we can do or what we look like,
then there's a spectrum.
That's it. And we're all on death row.
Absolutely.
About how close to the end you are.
Or you're like one accident away or something.
This is it. So,
but this is where it's complicated. So there'll be people that. So you and I. We're Christians. We believe God made us. We have an intrinsic value. Is that right? We have the most wonderful, most beautiful. Like Jesus died for us. That's how much we matter, right? We are insanely valuable to Him. Like He loved us that much. Other people don't believe that.
Yeah.
There are people who do not believe. Like technically, you don't matter. You're no different to a maggot. Like, yet in COVID. Everybody cared about. Nobody wanted to die. Everybody cared about life. Everybody was so pro-life that the will to live was phenomenally strong. How do you? Yeah, I do get bogged down there. I do get tied up in the confusion. It does get me. Like on one sense, nobody most people don't really agree that you matter that much. Yet nobody wants to be meaningless. To have a meaningless existence is a dreadful thing. That's a depressive.
Yeah.
Nobody wants to be there.
Yeah. I think an issue like this brings to the fore what we really think about human value.
Right.
Now, most people would at least like to think that they believe in human rights, that human beings matter. Most people in our society would like to think that's their stance. And yet they support abortion. Why? Because the unborn child has become dehumanized in their thinking. And so the only reason there's this discrepancy between the toddler and the child in the womb is that the child in the womb has been dehumanized. And so we can help them to see that the reasons they're giving for why the unborn don't matter, none of them make sense. They're arbitrarily selected. They're just like, well, where'd you get that from? Why should size dictate our value? You know, they're almost all of them are on a spectrum. So it's impossible just to pinpoint, that's when it starts.
Yeah, it's not clear.
So it's a stab in the dark, literally.
Yes.
And then thirdly, you know, if we are to adopt that criterion, well, you know, that means all sorts of people are in danger of being killed.
Or should be killed.
Or should be killed, right. To be consistent.
To be consistent, yeah. Just...
So the inconsistency for us is an opportunity.
Right, yeah. Because it's wrong to be double-minded on an issue of such significance.
And even the unregenerate mind generally is...
What does unregenerate mind mean?
Not born again, you know. So,
right.
So, you know, the non-Christian mind is generally still quite sensitive, I think, to inconsistency, hypocrisy.
Yes.
You know, people are like, hang on, you can't say that and do that.
You can't say go left, go right.
That's right.
So
there's an opportunity there for us to show, actually, if, as you say, you believe in human rights, you care about human life, then how can you not apply that to the unborn child?
So do you think part of the issue is that we live in seemingly like an increasingly nihilistic society? Like euthanasia is becoming, it's been talked of, and perhaps am I guilty now of going off on a separate issue?
It's a really important question. I think we're going to have to tackle that another time.
Right.
Because it's another whole topic, and it is a real issue. And that is where much of our society is headed.
Yeah.
However, a lot of people can be won over by the sort of conversation we're having here.
Right.
Because they've been deceived or distracted.
And this is simple and effective.
It is simple.
It's simple. It keeps the main thing the main thing.
That's right. And if they truthfully would not do that to a toddler, the only logical conclusion can be, therefore we shouldn't do it to the same baby just a few months earlier either.
No.
And that's the consistent conclusion. So we will come on to that other area. Well, what about those who just have lost all sense of value of human life altogether?
Yeah.
And that's an important thing.
Yeah.
Most people, even if they say that that's their view,
isn't the case.
Most people,
COVID proved it's not the case.
Exactly.
Like 99%.
Exactly.
Suicides happen. People, it's an awful thing, but most healthy people.
That's right. Most people value their lives. Most people value other people's lives to some degree. Most people, because, you know, we're made in the image of God, and we're built to live. You know, it's an instinct to survive.
Life's an amazing thing.
Yeah, and most people intuit that at some level. But there is an issue of, you know, and we can observe this historically around the world. Certain cultures, certain political philosophies can breed a real sort of pessimistic view of human life itself.
Is that a gospel issue then?
I think it is a gospel issue deep down.
Yes, having no hope.
It is a gospel issue. But we'll come on to that another time, because that's a really important area. But this particular line of reasoning rests on this idea that, okay, you say you believe in human rights, you wouldn't kill the toddler. Why then would you kill the baby in the womb? And we can, using questioning, we can help people to giving them an opportunity to be consistent. And if you would protect the toddler, you've got to protect the unborn child, because of course size isn't what makes us matter.
No.
Nor is, you know, our cognitive functions or whatever. Okay, let's just draw this to close in a couple of minutes now, and we'll have more time in future sessions to pick up some of that.
Yeah.
Just want to throw in a few little details here. So the use of pictures alongside these conversations is so helpful.
Visual aids.
Yes, so helpful.
Image.
Because we've got the opportunity to not only describe life in the womb, but point to a picture of a life in the womb. And they can see, even children say, oh, that's a baby.
Yeah.
On our displays, walking past, they'll see this living embryo in the womb. Oh, that's a baby. What's that baby doing there, mummy? Even they can tell. And that's just at 8 weeks, 10 weeks. So the pictures, again, really help to keep the main thing. Okay, so with our words, with our pictures, put the babies back in the center. Okay. I've got a badge I'm going to give you. In fact, I've got one, I think, just here. This is a badge, which is a picture of an unborn child, life size. Okay, this is a gift for you. There we are.
Oh, awesome.
All right, so that's a life-size 8-week human embryo. Now, if you wear that, it's going to prompt some conversations.
Yes.
And you can ask people, what do you think about that? Did you know that's what you looked like at 8 weeks? Did you know your heart was already beating? It helps to keep the main thing. Of course, if you come out on our displays, that's a great way to provoke conversations.
Yeah.
People can go to join the movement, cbruk.org/join. You can go out even just in 1s and 2s with other trained volunteers with leaflets. There are lots of ways you can kind of stimulate interest and start the conversation. So let's just do a quick recap of some of the key things there. So Dave, top question to start off a conversation about abortion. What do we tend to open with?
What do you think about abortion?
Simples, and it gets them talking. What are one or two of the helpful questions to kind of open things up a bit more?
What do you mean by that?
Good, yeah.
How did you come to that conclusion?
Fantastic, yeah. Those are two of your favourite questions to keep things opening up so you can diagnose where their thinking's going wrong. Great. Okay, do you remember the tool? What was our 3-part tool?
I can, but I'm common ground.
Common ground?
Analogy and question.
Great, common ground, analogy, question. I find that so helpful, and the problem with me is I get bored of things quickly. So I often, I'm like, okay, I've got one thing. Okay, what's the next?
Yeah.
And I remember going through a phase of like, common ground, analogy, question. Yeah, whatever. Let's try something new. And I keep coming back to common ground, analogy, question.
Okay.
It's always helpful.
Yeah.
Just really helps to direct the conversation. Okay. Within common ground, analogy, question, the analogy bit, telling a story. Okay. What do we often find helpful to do there? What kind of fictional character do we bring into the... Do you remember what we did?
The adult? The born child?
The born child.
Yeah, the child further on.
Exactly, yeah. So we call that trotting out the toddler. Okay.
Trotting out the toddler?
Trot out the toddler, yeah. Cool. So whatever the scenario is, if it's financial, medical, age of the mother, whatever...
It's always relevant.
Just trot out the toddler.
Right.
And it really helps to clarify the issue.
Yes.
Because now it's an innocent victim.
And it's human.
It's human.
It's alive.
And the only difference between that toddler and the same toddler a few months ago is size,
time,
level of development,
growth,
environment, dependency, and that continues.
Yeah.
Right?
The fundamentals are still there. It's a human.
It's the same person.
Yeah, it's the same person.
Okay, so we trot out the toddler, we keep the main thing, and we remember that this issue is simple, and we're helping to keep it simple by keeping the focus on the unborn child. Okay, and we remember that if the unborn aren't human, we don't need to have a discussion about abortion. But if the unborn are, no justification for abortion
is even possible.
Is possible.
Yeah.
And it is that simple.
It is that simple.
Okay, common ground, analogy, question.